Okay. Well, let's start with thank you all for coming. And should be, I hope, a very interesting discussion. How's the temperature? Cold, warm, good? Okay, if it gets either way, let me know. I have the code for the control. We can do that. If everyone would, if you have a cell phone, put it on vibrate or mute, that would be great. We have a bunch of stuff. We gave you a lot of information. One, there's a lecture scheduled for some of the upcoming ones. We have Dr. K coming next Thursday talking about bioidentical hormones, thyroid hormones. He's right, I believe, in Burlington. He's great, and it should be a good lecture. And then in January, I'm going to be giving a talk here in the evening on pain and inflammation and how lifestyle choices, diet, can aggravate or increase pain and inflammation, and what you can do and what you can take to help deal with pain and inflammation. So those are the next couple. And then in February, Kevin Ryan, one of our pharmacists, is going to be talking about men's health. And it will be for both men and women, talking about what you can do for better health over time, and then specific problems that men have as we grow up. And the women probably know more about problems than we do, because guys are usually a little oblivious to everything. So that's that. You also have a coupon which is good for 20% off after till closing tonight. So on anything in the store except prescriptions. And what else did I want to tell you before we get started? I gave you a catalog or a educational piece from Enzymatica talking about enzymes, because with the subject ADD, ADHD, there's a lot of food and digestive issues that go along with that. Unfortunately, what's happened there, if any of you have seen their previous catalog, it had a lot more information, how the enzymes work, why digesting certain foods differently can be beneficial. The FDA has come out with new guidelines, and you're going to find most companies are pulling most of their helpful information off their websites. So a lot of the websites realistically are becoming almost useless. And this has as much information as the FDA would allow. And so if you have the old catalogs, we have a couple of copies which I'd like to keep here, but you're welcome to look at them. It goes into much more information, but they did a good job putting it together. You have a couple of samples. One, anyone here take magnesium? Okay. Magnesium, very good for the bowel. It's also very calming. So you have a sample of natural calm. This was great marketing. You have to mix it up in warm hot water, make a tea out of it, and then drink it. So one, magnesium is very calming to the brain and to the muscles, but also it makes you stop what you're doing, heat up the water, dissolve it, and sit down and sip it. So it makes you relax a little too. Another nice thing, it comes in a few flavors. So if you're dealing with a pediatric population, especially in the spectrum, taste and texture is a big issue. And so it comes in capsule. We have magnesium capsules. You can open it up. This has different flavors. So there's always a different way to do it. No matter what you're trying to accomplish, we can always help you figure out a way to get it to work. And lastly is Digest Spectrum. And the advantage of this enzyme, one, it covers all the food groups, but it gives extra support for gluten, phenol, lactose, and casein. And especially the phenols and casein are usually a big, big issue with digestion with kids or adults with ADD, ADHD. So you have a sample to see what that's like. And then if the issue is, but they can't swallow capsules, and when I mix it up, they don't like the taste, we have a chewable coming in by Da Vinci Labs, and they're sending it in, so we'll have a sample, but supposedly it's delicious, and it's a digestive enzyme, and it has probiotics in it, and it's chewable, and doesn't have any junk in it, which is good. So with that, I'm going to get started. This webinar and any associated materials are for educational purposes only. The information provided is not meant to cure, treat, or prevent disease, and this program hasn't been reviewed by the FDA. And that's something you're going to be seeing everywhere now. We have to say that this presentation has not been put through the FDA. Okay, what's normal? Whether we're talking kids or adults, we're either all abnormal or we're all normal. Everyone is different, each one of us. And so one of the problems that we're seeing on the pharmacy side is we're trying to put everyone behind door number 1, 2, or 3. And if someone's behavior doesn't match one of those groups, they have a problem. And that really isn't necessarily so. In this room, some of us are probably a little hyperactive, if you want to look at it that way. We don't like to sit still. We always want to be doing. We have 3 balls in the air. Some of us are very methodical. We get hung up on a project and we lose track of time. Does that mean we have ADD, ADHD? I'll pick on myself. I'll be in the den, and the laundry room is right off the den, and my wife will be going out, and that's my wife, back here, Lauren. She'll be going out to do an errand, and the wash came out of the washing machine. It's in the dryer. We have the alarm on the dryer turned up so the whole house vibrates when it goes off. And she's wonderful. She said, when the alarm goes off, will you just pull it out and put it on the couch? And I'm working on a lecture or puttering around doing something, and I say, sure. And of course, the house shakes, the alarm rings, I hear it, and I say to myself, as soon as I finish this, I'll go get it. 3 hours later, Lauren comes home, and, oh, you folded the laundry and put it away. And what laundry? Do I have ADD? I don't think so. That's just me. I have a mental block for laundry. So would Ritalin help me? Or Adderall help me? Probably not. I'd probably get real buzzy and get aggravated and real short-tempered. So, especially with the kids, we have to be careful and look at each person as an individual. That look in class is classic. That person needs help. They need some medication. They don't pay attention. Now maybe they do, but maybe isn't a good sleeper. Or there's a new baby in the house that's keeping him up at night, so he's spacing. Or maybe he's bored. Any of us know somebody who wasn't doing well in school because they could be getting A's because the work is so easy, but since they're bored, that's what they do, and they get D's or F's or C's. And they could be getting A's and just breezing right through. And so you really have to look at each, I'm going to keep coming back to this, each person. That look could be, there's a processing issue, or the way it's being taught isn't good for this student, this child. And we have to find different tools and different ways to help. Medication isn't always the answer. Stressors such as the environment, toxins, bad digestion, poor nutrition can all affect how we behave. And if you think about it, our body makes all sorts of chemicals, all sorts of neurotransmitters, and they come from the food we eat. And just because we're eating good food, if we're constipated, we have bad, upset stomach, it doesn't process right, or we have diarrhea, we're not breaking down the food, absorbing it, and giving the body the building blocks it needs to make the nutrients it needs. So there could be an imbalance, and the person could be having trouble concentrating, be hyperactive on that end, but not need medication. They need to get the underlying imbalance fixed. And that's really, I think, what my part of the talk is going to be. I hope I get across that we have to look at each child or adult as an individual. And my mentor, Dr. Hinz, always said, that's great, you understand where they are. Why isn't the body adapting or responding appropriately? If we had, I don't drink espresso, but what do they call it, a quad espresso? It's 4 shots of espresso, and sometimes you hear people adding it to a cup of coffee. If any of us had that, we would have trouble concentrating or staying on track or not exploding. And that is because of our behavior, because of what we did to ourselves. If you're eating white sugar, white flour, and your blood sugar is going up and down all the time, you will have trouble concentrating and staying on track. And Adderall or Strattera isn't going to help. So we really have to look at what's going on. Prescription drugs create more stress on the system. Now, sometimes they're necessary, but if they're not necessary, you're adding another stressor which causes more imbalance in the body. So the best option is to figure out what's the underlying problem and help the body work. I gave a talk, I say this almost every lecture, at an elementary school, and when I was about diet and exercise and getting a good night's sleep and why that's important. And at the end, a third or fourth grader raised his hand, and he said to me, sounds like nature gave us this wonderful body that wants to be healthy, and we do everything in our power to try to break it. And this little kid got it right, so let's support the body. Interesting statistics. 1999, there were about a little over 500,000 people taking a medication for ADD, ADHD. In 2011, we were at 3,500,000, and it's even higher. So the body doesn't change in 10 years. Humankind doesn't change. So something's going on. Either we're doing something to make more people, according to mainstream, need medication, or where it's either something in the environment, something in our lifestyle, something, all the electronics we're using. Maybe it's the teaching, the way we're teaching. But we're using the medication to get everybody to calm down, sit still, and do the work. Now, I want to say, an analogy I like to use is you bought a 3-family house, and it has a bad foundation. So you put artificial support in to hold the house up and keep it level. That's how I equate to pharmaceuticals. You're helping, and it's a good thing in some cases. But the problem is on the mainstream side, we don't fix the imbalance. We don't fix the foundation. So medication can be very beneficial to get you in a place where you can do the work to fix the foundation. And so that's a very important distinction. It's not never use meds. Sometimes the meds are needed. There's a Dr. Keith Connors, and he thinks, believe it or not, he's a child psychologist. He's a world-renowned child psychologist. A quote from him is that the medication, the selling of the ADD, ADHD diagnosis is a national disaster of dangerous proportions. And he feels, or he's looking into, what if many of the people with ADD, ADHD, you could fix the imbalance? You're not trying to cure. It's not really we call it a disease. But it isn't the disease, it's who the person is. So the answer isn't, let's cure them of ADD or cure them of ADHD or Asperger's or autism. How about what can we do to help their body and brain function more centered so they can live in our world more efficiently? So medicine sometimes is the answer. But I think most of us will agree we're over-prescribing this medicine. And if you look in the college campuses, the kids are selling their Ritalin to help with studying. And what I found very interesting in pharmacy school, they didn't have Ritalin, it was methamphetamine, which, that's the drug of choice back then for ADD, ADHD. And in pharmacy school, there were 4 kids that belonged to Rokai, which is the honor society. They had a straight 4.0. They aced every single exam. They were taking methamphetamine before each exam, which helps you study. But everybody gets what they deserve, because what was interesting is when you speed and study, as long as you're speeding, almost 100% of the information's there. But when you come down, you lose some of it. They all flunked the boards after 5 years of school because it was cumulative. So they had a 4.0, and all 4 of them flunked the boards. And so There is poetic justice in that. Okay, some of the risks with the medicine. Again, anytime you put something in your mouth, benefit risk. If the benefit far outweighs the risk, it's worth doing. If the risk outweighs the benefit, you should really give it another thought. With these drugs, decreased appetite, anxiety, irritability, headaches, a lot of tics start getting worse or developing or come out. Another issue is, especially in the pediatric population, once these kids get on these drugs, they're on them. And so then they reach puberty. They're not sleeping well, they have no appetite, so they're not growing. And then there's all sorts of hormonal issues, and this follows them for life. Now, I used to be in Alston, and back when I was a kid, I worked in my parents' pharmacy, and there were kids on methamphetamine or Ritalin back then. And some of them are customers here out in Waltham. They're still on the medication. So this is what, I'm 60, so 50, 40 years later. So the medicine isn't a cure. There's no cure, because you shouldn't be trying to cure, you should be trying to help. So we want to look at the individual. We want to identify causes and triggers. And Jen's going to be talking, I think, a lot about that instead of trying to medicate the reaction, how about helping the person figure out a way to work around the problem and get to the end point? And I'll say that this is my daughter, Jen. She, which I didn't realize when she was in school, and she'd come home, she was using some of her techniques on me. If I had a bad day and I came home in a bad mood, we had, oh, you're having a thumbs down day, how do we turn it to a thumbs up? Or, I'm banging my head up against the wall with an issue, and it's, why don't we try this? A different way of doing it. And much better than take a Valium, you'll calm down.
Gary?
Yes?
I have a question. On all the lists of symptoms that you just had,
Yeah.
and I agree with Mo, we have, all my grandchildren have ADD, and I wonder where they get it from. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to ask you that's not on that list is, if these kids are on medication, does that make them more likely to get involved in drugs and be addicted to drugs? Because I'm thinking that this might be a problem.
Well,
I've read about it, and then I'm looking at some of my grandchildren, especially one, and I'm saying, is this a relationship?
I'll answer that with, I guess, a question, in that I think it depends upon the person and their psyche, because you could have someone who never drank, never smoked marijuana, and was never on these drugs, which are addicting, that get hooked on pharmaceuticals. So I think the biggest issue would be if the answer in the family is, whenever there's a problem, we have a pill for that. That can lead to, I think, more drug use. That there's always, I don't have to change anything. I can always find a drug to solve my problem. So that's that. Now, an interesting thing with all the kids in one family having it, we had someone, a case back probably 10, 12 years ago when I was working with my mentor, Dr. Hins, and they had 5 or 6 kids. Every kid was in the spectrum, but each one was at a slightly less intense level. So how do we figure, what's with that? Wound up like a year and a half later working with the family. They were all doing better. We finally figured out, the mother just mentioned, they had bought a Victorian house before she got pregnant, and they wanted to have the house nice and clean and ready for when she gets pregnant, so they stripped all the paint off. And so in the winter, they were busy sanding all the paint in this 120-year-old house. So it was all lead paint, and they were using strippies, but it was freezing, so they had the windows closed. So it wound up the mother was toxic when she was pregnant, and over the years, her body was slowly clearing out the toxin, so each baby was exposed for less. So, we don't know. There's a million answers. But to answer your question, I don't think, it depends upon the person and how they're made up. Okay. Also, with the medication, you can still do the holistic side. Or without medication, you can do the holistic side. They don't interfere with each other. What can happen is, if you get the body working better, They might be over-medicated. You might find they're a little bit jiggy because they're on too high a dose, which is a good thing. Then you taper it down. So GI function, diet, yeast overgrowth, vaccinations. And the autistic side, we're seeing a lot of parents that say their baby was fine. They got a shot, a vaccine, and then a day or two later, all of a sudden, the baby wasn't there. Mainstream saying nothing to do with it, that was probably going to happen anyway. We don't know. So should you vaccinate or not vaccinate? That's a personal decision. My feeling is if you are going to vaccinate, spread them way out. Only get the vaccine, the shot when you're healthy. When I was growing up, I think we had 6 vaccines over years. Now the kids, I think within the first 3 months, they have 10 or 12 shots. And their immune system isn't ready to react to this yet. We're overloading their system. And there can be some inherited tendencies. Antibiotics. A lot of kids we're finally changing that with ear infections and antibiotic use. We're cutting way, way back on antibiotics. But antibiotics kill the good bacteria in the gut also. And think of the lawn. You have grass and weeds. If you keep spraying weed killer, you'll keep the dandelions and crabgrass at bay. The minute you stop, they flourish and take over the grass. Same thing in our gut. If you kill the good bacteria, the yeast and parasites all take over. And an interesting thing about yeast, the candida, the metabolic waste of candida crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it's neuroactive. It hits the stimulating receptor sites, so it can make you very, very hyper. It also causes you to crave white flour, white sugar, which then destroys the environment, so candida can bloom and the good bacteria start dying. And that has a real big effect on these kids and adults.
Okay, quick question.
Yes.
Is there a few or one thing that you found to be effective? Because some people use like fluconazole and some of these other things, or more herbal, or what has been the
question was, is there something good you can do for candida? The diflucan, fluconazole, is good. It's like an atomic bomb. It kills candida. But if you think about it, if you take care of your lawn, I'll go back to the lawn, and water it, get the soil to the right pH, give it organic food, and mow it the way it should be mowed, the good grass is going to choke out all the bad grass. So what you want to do is, there's a lot of things, but by each person is different. You want to get the environment in the gut back to the way it should be. You want to get the good bacteria in, and you want to have the foods that don't feed the candida, and you can turn it around. So you really, diflucan, when it came out on the market, I remember it was a 200 milligram tablet. It came 1 per prescription, and 1 tablet was supposed to cure you forever of candida. Now everyone gets 30 with 12 refills. So I guess it didn't do a good job curing. Sometimes you need it to get the numbers down, but it isn't the final answer. Changes in environmental factors, we need to adjust the diet, the social environment. What if the child is trying to study, has older brothers and sisters that are busy running around with loud music, and just the environment at home isn't conducive to studying? If they're near the edge where they're having trouble studying, that's enough to push them over. Or what if the diet? Mom and Dad they're working and life is tough, so we always stop at McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken on the way home. You're not giving the body what it needs. Then you're trying to get them to study. How many of you have had, not a couple slices, half a pizza or a big bowl of pasta, a real high carb meal? You are usually very foggy brain, or most people are, an hour or 2 later. So what if that was dinner and then you have to do your homework? Do you have ADD? No, that was dietary, that was environmental that was causing the problem. Homeopathy is very helpful, again, not to cure, because we're not trying to cure a disease, but to help. If the child is waking up at night, or the adult with nightmares, there's a homeopathic remedy, stramonium. I'm going to go into a couple of remedies. Pulsatilla, lycopodium, there's different remedies that can be helpful for the different symptoms, and not to suppress it, but to help the body get centered again so the symptom lessens, and then it's easier to deal with everyday life. And just this gentleman back here I'm going to pick on, that's Ray. And Ray, I've known Ray for about 15 years. Ray went to the Learning Prep, which is where Jen works, and it's a school that helps teach tools for you individually how to work around your blocks. And when I first met Ray, he's a great guy, but he was we've known each other long enough. It was difficult dealing with him some days. Some days everything was great, other days you couldn't talk. It was very combative. Ray now has his own business, he's thriving and doing well, and he's just gonna talk for a second about diet, because he's a walking example.
15 years ago is when I sort of began to discover whole foods, and I started eliminating certain ingredients that I was fed as a kid, such as the nitrates, preservatives, artificial flavors, corn syrup, artificial colors, and all that. And I'm sure Gary's heard too that especially red dyes contribute to ADD and ADHD. And just so you know, I was only diagnosed 7 months before graduating from high school with Asperger's by Dr. Daniel Rosen in Wellesley. And part of that's because it was only seen in 1994 by the medical industry as a learning disability. So I've never been on any drugs, and I strictly believe that it is the food that we are eating that is killing us, essentially. Because here we are eating these chemicals. Now, like I was saying, we're taking these drugs. Of course, that's completely screwing us up. If you go back 50, 60 years, I'm sure you folks, as you look old enough, there were a farm down the street. No, there was a farm down the street. You went and got your food, you went and got your milk, went and got your freshly grown produce. Today, it's coming from California, it's coming from Brazil, and wherever else. Who knows what it's picking up during that time, and it can't get its maximum nutrients, because it's being picked too prematurely. So, that's what I say.
Now we have with ADD, ADHD, it's not just ADD, ADHD, there's I think 8 different kinds of ADD. We're not looking for labels, but this slide you might find helpful. There's symptoms of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. So what would be helpful is figuring out what symptoms you have, because then it's easier to figure out what's going on in the body and also what tools to help you work around it. And this is why, if you look at all these, and we need a mathematician here, how many possible combinations are there? Probably thousands. And so how do you get all those different people into door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3? This drug, that drug, or that drug? You can't. And so we really should work at working with each individual. You need to explore the triggers, what makes it better, what makes it worse. We want to eliminate some of the agitators. You want to identify what isn't working well. If they have poor digestion, just putting good food in isn't going to help. They're not breaking it down. You want to get digestion working better. If your lifestyle on the computer till late at night, non-stop, that's putting the blue light, full spectrum light in. They're never going to go to sleep. And that can help. They might be calmer when they're on the computer, but too much screen time isn't good for anyone. And then we have the diet. Different triggers, just to give you some ideas, if they're having food sensitivities or the additives or the red dye, that can be an issue in the GI, adrenal, liver, pancreas could be overloaded, lack of sleep. That can come from poor digestion. It's not just the adrenals are overstimulated. It can be the liver's working too hard, trying to detox the body. The constipation can be from just about any of these areas. Electromagnetic radiation, a lot of people just say there's no such thing or it doesn't bother us. Just to illustrate, we had a little boy who was raped all day long. He got into bed and it was Jekyll and Hyde. He was up yelling and screaming all night. He wouldn't go to sleep. And about 4 years later, they checked the electromagnetic radiation. They lived in I think it was a 24-story apartment building, and the electrical trunk for the whole building was right by the head of his bed. So, but that was the proper place to put the bed. They put the bed in the other corner by the door. He slept through the night. It must have been a coincidence, but it worked. Okay, so we need to figure out ways of coping with stress and coping with our processing issues, a nourishing diet, exercise, supplements, homeopathy, detox, relaxation, positive attitude. Instead of sit down now, figure out what do they need and help them, and they'll be able to sit down. You want to drink plenty of water, exercise regularly, minimize toxins, reduce stress, and eat healthy. That's for all of us. To stay healthy, or if you're not healthy, that's important for everyone. Eat high protein diet, more complex carbs, fewer simple carbs. Start cutting down on white flour, white sugar, more omega-3 fatty acids. They're finding by giving EPA and DHA to the kids, a lot of the teachers are asking the parents, what medication is your child on? They're doing much better. And that just makes sense. We're not getting the amount of omega-3 that we should, right?
Something I found out a few weeks ago was one of our winter squashes, spaghetti squash, actually contains omega-3 and 6.
Yeah. And it's delicious.
Yeah.
Okay, processed foods, artificial sweeteners. You want to be eating as much non-GMO food, which is real food. Eliminate refined sugar. Margarine is all trans fats. That should be outlawed. I don't know why it's still on the market. And as I said earlier, gluten and casein is a big issue, and there are enzymes for that. Nuts, if you're not allergic to them, organic fresh fruit, use real butter, whole grains, non-hydrogenated fats. And this is all in your handout, so I'm just going to go through this. You want to reduce stress, a gentle detox. We can all use a gentle detox, but you don't want to do a high-level detox. You want to think of a river from the snow cap to the ocean. And the body's the same way. The cells go to the lymph system, to the liver, to the bowel, and out. So we need to figure out where are the dams in your river and start downstream. A lot of people do detox and get sick or don't feel well. That's because they started too far upstream. So very individual, the protocol. And also, it's very easy to do. You don't have to feel lousy to feel better. I'm just going to run through a couple of things, and we can talk afterwards. I want to get to what Jen has to say. Dimethyl Glycine is a lot of research on that. It gives you two methyl groups and glycine. Methylation, anyone heard of methylation? Methylation is how the body detoxes. Very, very important. And most of us don't methylate the way we should because our diet's lacking in the foods we need. This is derived from foods, and it gives you two methyl groups, which is very good for detoxing. But if you look at the literature, it talks about that it improves behavior, eye contact, social interaction, mental alertness, stamina. And so is it a cure for everything? It's a cure for nothing, but it helps your body function the way it's supposed to be functioning. So it can be very helpful. There's a couple products put together, one in a pleasant tasting liquid or in capsules that has the dimethyl glycine, it has B12, magnesium, zinc, B6, and folic acid. Very helpful. And the Autism Society has found that for a lot of people this is very, very helpful. It's not a magic bullet. It's giving the body the nutrients we're not getting from our diet. I have a slide talking about focus, HP and CP. HP has alcohol, CP doesn't. This is a blend of homeopathics that can help the body with focus, clarity, and concentration. Again, it's not the answer, but a lot of people have found that it does help you get more centered. It doesn't interfere with any medication. There's a multiple vitamin with a lot of the nutrients that helps with the neurotransmitters. And it's focus, nutriplenish focus. Talked about spectrum. Omega-3 is unbelievable. No matter how you need to take it, there's a way to do it. There's liquid, there's big gel caps, there's high DHA. They pump up the DHA, which is very helpful on the mental side. There's chewable, there's liquid. So whatever it is, it's worth trying because each of us is different. And so you can find a way to do it. We talked about magnesium. This is what's in focus HP. It really is very good for the anxiety, the stress, the trouble sitting still. The reason being, these remedies are in there Sometimes finding a single remedy is great. Sometimes you can't figure that out right away. So using something like the Focus CP is good because it has a lot of remedies in there, and the body will use what it needs. Pulsatilla is the mild, timid, emotional child, a person that's contradictory and very moody. Lycopodium is the person who procrastinates a lot, apprehensive, easily annoyed, extremely oversensitive, and lacks self-confidence. Berita Cobb is a very big remedy that's very helpful in a lot of people that have the spectrum type disorders. Easily distracted, difficulty focusing, difficulty waiting their turn, trouble following directions, sustaining attention. That's probably most of us at different times of different days, but Berita is a very helpful remedy. So you want, and I'll turn this over to Jen in a second, but really I found that having a schedule or knowing what's going on and what's expected is very, very helpful for people who have attention issues. You want to limit technology, try to get them more organized, essential oils, massage, yoga, very, very helpful. Sometimes, and they're using this a lot in the schools, there's excitatory neurotransmitters and calming neurotransmitters. The kids that are hyperactive, they're driving the car with 2 feet. They have the accelerator pushed all the way to the floor, and their brakes are worn out. So when they're sitting there and they're busy clicking or turning in their chair or tapping a pen or breaking pencils all the time, a part of it is the excitatory is too high. So when they start with the motions, that's burning off some of the excitatory neurotransmitters. So it makes it easier for them to settle down. So sometimes before sitting down to do some work, let's go out and run around and shoot some baskets or play tag. And then it might be easier to sit down and focus for a little while because you've burned off some of those excitatory neurotransmitters. And I think, yes. So now, any questions? Yes.
You talked about lead earlier and environmental toxins. So when you think about that, there's some functional medicine doctors that might go the route of say that they're concerned about that if you're chelating out from your body some of the metals, they might move around and possibly cause an issue with collecting in the brain. But you have others that are into B12 glutathione shots, and if you have the guts, I guess, go for the drip version. Is there any middle ground with that as far as?
I think that's really too specific for today. Yes, there is middle ground, but again, you have to go by each person and what's necessary. Some people, if they're extremely toxic, they need to get those heavy metals right out. But most of the time, a gentle detox over time is a better way to do it. Okay, and just give me 1 second to get this out, get this started. And I'm here to answer your questions if you have any. And thank you all for coming.
I am as well.
And Ray's here too. Thank you, Ray.